So if you go to the very top, you'll see a green where your screen is sharing. And I think I'm not able to push record, but I think you might be able to push record from the very top. Oh, it is recording.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
I'll get my son to edit.
Excellent.
Okay. That's great. Okay, so welcome everybody to our webinar tonight on the science of screen time and how digital technology affects childhood brain architecture. I don't know about you, Amy, but I do find this is a real topic of concern for a lot of parents. We have a lot of heated discussions and people's views are very, very different. And I think everybody's views are okay. And then my goal tonight was just to kind of share what I have learned through my professional development on screen time, but also share what I experience as a mom of 5 teenagers and young people. So, and I thought it's nice to be realistic. So my name is Judy Arnall, and I am a certified Canadian family life educator. My website is professionalparenting.ca. And with me tonight is Amy Bryant. Amy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Bryant. I'm a psychotherapist locally in Atlanta, Georgia, and I do some online work on parentingbeyondpunishment.com.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for doing this presentation together. And like I said, I'm a little bit of a idealist in that I go to conferences and read research, but I'm also a realist in that I have 5 kids that range in age from 15 to 25. And our background is we are actually unschoolers, which means that my kids have a lot of time in the day, and screen time has figured very big in our lives. So as somebody who has not put a whole lot of controls on my kids, I thought I would offer up our story to tell you how they eventually did self-regulate and as they got older. And Amy, what's your family story?
I have an 8-year-old daughter. She goes to a local small Montessori school. She also has screen time, and we're sort of navigating what works for her and ways to help her, in those difficult moments transitioning around screen time, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about. So.
Yes. Yes, so I pretty well raised my kids when they were young in the 90s, and we didn't really, other than Disney videos, it was way different then. We had just videos, and we only had them at home. We didn't have screens on the go as we do now. But when my first son was 7, we got our first video game console in the house, and from then on, I pretty well lost control of how much time they loved it. They absolutely loved it. So it has been a struggle for me too. But I think I can look back now and say, well, you know what? I hope to assure everybody who's attending tonight that there's the recommendations, but there's also, you're a health consumer. You take those recommendations home and you decide how they apply in your life, right? Because it's not, you have to realize you know your child best and how it fits with your family life. Both Amy and I are a non-punitive parenting proponents for sure. So, and that's kind of how we met, is that there's a lot of parenting stuff out there, but a lot of it is not, it's positive, but it's not always non-punitive. So we definitely agree in our approach there. Yes. I'm going to skip over this. Yes. Anything, yeah? Amy, you want to add to that?
No, I totally agree. Judy and I had the privilege of meeting her in Canada. She was gracious enough to have me stay there while I was doing a training, and it was lovely, and she's just amazing. And she gifted me her books, which are equally amazing.
Oh, and it was so funny because I've always told my kids, never meet anyone over the internet.
I know. And then you had us at your house.
And my kids are going, what?
I bet. That's the real reason why 2 of your kids were there while we were there, right?
No, they had fun, much fun. So yes, so what we're going to do tonight is, I think parenting is one of the hardest jobs in the world. So feel free to put a tip jar on your kitchen table. I did it; it really worked well. And same if your wife put a tip jar or a partner, and same if your teacher. Because, you know, dealing with kids and screen time is a really hard thing to do a lot of the times. So a few housekeeping things. Where did this information come from? So a lot of this information is from Alberta Health Services, which is our health authority, Canadian Pediatric Society, Health Canada, American Academy of Pediatrics, and the Palets Foundation, which has a new Brain Story certification course available for anyone who wants to take it. It's a 30-hour course, and it's really, really good information. So I thought today, now I have a lot of slides here because I kind of use this for a lot of applications. So what I wanted to do tonight is I want to go through a few things on maybe the first 2 points, and then I left the slides in because I thought if questions come up, I can go back to the slide and sort of explain it a little better with visuals, because I know where every slide is. So if that's okay with you, I am going to skip over a lot of slides that are too wordy, and I just, you know, want to keep it simple a bit. So if everyone's okay with that, that's probably going to be our format. So we'll probably present for about 40 minutes and then have the next half hour for Q&A. Okay, so that's everyone. So let's start on technology, addiction, and parenting. Not that the 3 go together, but definitely literacy nowadays involves media management and good digital citizenship. As we know, our children are not just into books, they're into the whole digital landscape. So I'm going to throw a question out to people and ask, what on this list is not technology? Anybody want to write in the chat box, what is not technology?
It's chirping. Strawberry?
Yes, that's the one, strawberry. Exactly. So technology is not, everything else is technology. So when we talk about technology, is it good or bad? It's basically a tool. So let's define screen time. Screen time is anything with a screen that's electronic, and there's a whole range of those for babies to elderly people, definitely a lot of screens. So is technology good or bad is the next question. And the answer to that is, it depends. So technology can be good. So a clock is a technology. Clocks are really useful for keeping us on time, for telling us where to be somewhere. But like this clock, although I really, really love it, it's probably not best for my health. It's probably an example, but not so good clock, but our technology. So it can be both good or bad, depending on how we use it. Now, in my groups, I often ask people, okay, what are the pros of technology? And I divide the flip chart into what are the pros for parents and what are the pros for children. So do you want to take a few minutes and fill up this list, or anybody want to write in what are some pros for parents or children?
This time I'll be sure to say your name when you answer. Rose says it's an educational tool.
Mm-hmm.
And a distraction.
Anything on the child side? Well, other than it's, I guess, educational tools for parents and children.
Distraction could be for parents and children too. Samantha says for the child, access to lots of ideas.
Right, right. And pretty well every group I do, that is on the list for sure. So here's a list of some answers I get from parents. I think the parent side is a bit longer than the child side, which was interesting to me. But I added the mindless eating one because I know that when my teens are playing video games, I can slide a platter of veggies under them and they eat them. They disappear. They're totally gone, and they don't even know they ate them. So to me, that's a good thing. So those are the pros. And okay, so let's go. Okay, what are the cons of technology for parent and child? What are some things on that list?
The child, Catherine says the child can get zombified. Monica says less time for connection. Samantha says it can be hyper stimulating. And then she puts in quotes, the real world becomes boring.
That is a really big one now for teachers, very definitely. Okay, so when I did that in groups, that actually didn't ever come up, was that kids get very used to fast, lighted, exciting video games, and then you go into a math class and teachers have to make it just as exciting. So that is a huge problem for sure. So here are some things for the parent and the child that have come up in my groups too. And it looks like for the child, the list is a bit longer than for the parents. And that was interesting to me because you hope that the pros and cons are the same for both. So the next question is, can the pros be attained another way? So if we didn't use technology, is there other ways to get kids interested in learning or different topics? And I think we'd all agree the answer is yes. And then the question is, what did we do 10 years ago? So when we needed to keep kids quiet in restaurants, what did we do? And I'm of that age. I mean, what we did was we gave them the sugar cubes to build castles with and things like that. We brought crayons and markers and things. So that's a big concern, is if you, I know screens are convenient, but is it always the best way to keep kids occupied? So just a little quickie thing on parenting styles, and everybody has different, like there are very many authoritarian parents out there who say, okay, you get 1 hour screen time a day and that's it. And then there's very permissive parents out there who say, well, I don't care, just go at it. And then somewhere in the middle, there's a happy medium where you have collaborative, authoritative parents that say, okay, what are your needs? What are our needs? Let's get some routines and structure in place that we're both happy with. And that's probably where you want to go, is to aim for that green square about 70% of the time. So we have to be very conscious of what our children are looking at, but it also depends on the child. Some children get scared more easy. Also the content, some content is totally not appropriate for children, and the context. And the context is a parent there to help them sort things out, help explain things to them or not? And that's a big thing. What the research says is that definitely we use more technology to keep in touch, but this is a big one. There's less family time in activities we bring together and more time in fragmented or interrupted ones. So you look at a family game night, dad might go away to answer the phone, or mom might go away to get some snacks, but check her email, and the kids would do the same. So it's not one continuous happy board game family, it's more interrupted, fragmented, and sometimes those partners don't come back for a while. Advertising has hit children younger and more under the radar, under parents' radar, and kids multitask more, adults multitask more, but the research shows that we're not doing it any better. And children are alone more than ever and exposed to more adult contact. And that's probably the main concern for young children, is that they're spending more time on media because it goes everywhere. Like I said, back in the days when we just had video, we just had video at home. We didn't have it at the doctor's office or the restaurant or the traveling in the car. It was just at home. And then we spent that time in the car, traveling or doctor's office, talking or reading books to our children. So that's probably the main concern. Now, as far as research goes, we've only had the iPad out 7 years. 7 years. So there's no long-term studies, no good evidence on the effect of technology on older children. There is studies on the effect on younger children because we can study them faster. They're still young. But keep this in mind, the technology is too young. We don't know what impact our teenagers are going to have 20 years down the road. I've talked to a lot of parents, especially of teenagers, who say, oh, my child's one of those addicts, and I have to regulate their amount of game time because they have that addictive personality. In reality, addiction is a very complex matter, and because video gaming or internet addiction didn't make it into the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual that psychologists and psychiatrists use as their Bible, because they don't really know yet how to identify it or how to treat it. And without those parameters, it's very hard to say it's addiction. Now, that's not to say parents don't have anecdotal evidence on that, but we're still not sure if this is a cultural shift or it's a developmental stage of childhood, or how close it is. We know a lot of research says it's very close in nature to gambling. You know, that dopamine hit when you win the jackpot, well, when you win Bitcoins or you win whatever you win in games, it's the same brain activation on those pleasure centers, and that's why we want to keep playing. Amy, even email, or when people get a text, it's that same dopamine hit that we used to get when the mail used to come, and we thought, oh yeah, can't wait to go see what letters are in there. Right. And that's why adults keep checking their phones, because we want that newness and that excitement of that. So it's very hard to put limits on that. So what the medical community says is moderation and life balance is the most important, and I think a lot of people are striving to find that. Any thoughts on that, Amy?
Well, I just wanted to note that Susan said that she decided to turn off her notifications for everything except for her phone calls. Mm-hmm. And I can really relate to that, when you start to realize that you're on your phone looking at Facebook and post likes and answering texts all the time, that it really can take over. Mm-hmm. And just like you were saying earlier, Judy, that you're having game night and you go get everyone tea, and while you're there, you're just going to check your email or whatever really quick, and it does end up really taking a lot more time. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, for me, it's really that mindfulness piece. Mm-hmm. How can I be mindful about my use and about modeling my use?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that mindful, and we're seeing a lot more of that now, is where mindfulness workshops are coming up to just focus on what you're doing. Don't try and multitask.
Right. I'm a terrible multitasker, but as I understand it, most of us are, so.
Yeah, you are. Me too. And also, so addictions are very complex, like I said, but some people are predisposed to the addiction gene where they have genes. So if you look at your brain as this Lego house, and your genes are these red blocks, and they sit there and they're random. And we don't know which block is the gambling gene or the internet addiction gene, but we do know that what activates those genes or turns on the flashlight is the nurturing, the experiential part of living. So if you have a child who you think is predisposed to addictions, and there's 10 of them. It doesn't matter which addiction it is. There's process and substance addictions. But whether that gene is activated depends on their home environment and their parenting. So parenting plays a huge part of that. And when children have conscientious parents that are looking out for them, providing some scaffolding so that they can do what they can do, very often that addiction does not get activated. So at this point, do we have any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions. If you want to type it in the chat box or the Q&A area, either place, it'll show us a signal.
Okay. So what I want to do in this next stage is just kind of go through the different ages and stages and outline what's the main concern about digital technology and brain development at that stage. So as we know, now I'm going to scooch through a few of these slides real fast and just say the main point, but we know that kids develop in 4 domains at once. They develop emotionally, cognitively, socially, and physically. And they go through stages of brain development. And here we go. And the biggest worry right now is how children are developing their brains both socially and emotionally. And the one skill they need to develop to be healthy in those areas is language development. So how it works is babies are born with 100 billion brain cells. So you can kind of see in this square, that's a baby at birth, and the axons and the dendrites are not really connected to each other. So through experiences after they're born, when their mom picks them up and hugs them and cuddles them, and dad tickles their toes, they start developing the neurotransmitters go across these gaps between each brain cell and forms a pathway. And that's a really good thing, because by the time they're 6 or 7, they have tons and tons of pathways, because we know little toddlers, they're just so active and they're curious and they're touching and putting everything in their mouths, and that's what they do. They build their brains. And then by 15, the brain reinforces the pathways that are used a lot and prunes the pathways that aren't. So it can't sustain all these pathways in the middle, but it definitely can prune. And that's a good thing too. It just makes things stronger. So the main concern for babies and toddlers, so from 0 to 3 years, their whole job is to explore with their 5 senses. Now, anybody know what 2 senses do screens touch? Anybody want to say what those 2 senses are?
Samantha says hearing, sight, and Rose says touch.
Yeah. Okay. Mostly hearing and sight. Screens are nice to touch, but they're not like those board books where you have the fuzzy and the nets and the different textures. So, and yeah, they do put those screens and cell phones in your mouth, but they're not designed to be experienced that way. So, but children are wired, their brains are wired to explore in a 3-dimensional world using all 5 senses. So they're hearing, they're smelling, they're tasting. That's why everything goes in their mouth and they explore with their tongues, and all those senses. So that's what they need. That's their main job in the first couple years. And then toddlers, same thing too. They're still exploring with all their 5 senses, but they have all this other stuff going on with their wild, amazing feelings. Now, babies and toddlers are big consumers of technology. You can see these little baby chairs. They have screens to keep them busy. The biggest development here is wearable technology for children. And I went to a conference, and the presenter, she said that if you read the warning pamphlet that comes with an iPad, it says to download your apps and your software at least 3 feet away. And yet we're putting iPads this close to babies' faces. And children tend to be vulnerable because their skin is thinner. They're more vulnerable to environmental toxins. So do we really want to put on wearable technology on our babies when there's not that evidence-based testing yet? That was a major concern with babies and technology. So safety tips here, turn it off. The recommendations, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out in October 2015 and said that no technology, no screens for under 18 months except video chat. Under 2 years, maybe 20 minutes a day, but with watching with adults. The Canadian Pediatric Society came out with new recommendations last month and said they were a little harder than American Academy and said none, not even video chat. Let's keep it clean, no technology for children under 2. And the major concern is language development. Here's what the research says, is that there are no evidence that screens cause developmental problems, but there's no evidence that screens help learning either. But there are these cautions. Children may have understimulation of gross motor, their eye and ear senses, disturbed sleep patterns, so too much blue light is keeping those babies awake at night, definite language development if they're not engaging in with their parents, physical coordination, they're not getting enough time playing with real toys, getting outdoors, and interacting with parents. And there was a lot of evidence that said that screens don't, the ability to use a screen doesn't mean that you understand it. So, for example, we drive cars, and we get behind a car and we can drive it, we know it works, but I couldn't pop the hood and tell you how an engine works, right? The same thing for young children. They know how to use technology, but it doesn't mean they understand or it's beneficial to them other than pushing buttons. We had a study in Alberta that was done by Alberta Education and Alberta Health, and it was a mapping project that's going across Canada. It may be going across US too, but it is indicators that will measure a child's physical, social, language development, and in the year that they go to kindergarten, which is age 5. And it was very interesting because this study showed that 1 in 4 children are at risk for language development. And if they can't have the language, they can't really develop socially and emotionally. So if you look at a child who gets his truck stolen by another child at kindergarten, and he can't use his words, he can't say, "That's my truck, I want it back," and instead he pushes the other child, that is not good social or emotional development. He needs to start using his words, but he gets those words from adults around him that talk. So when we're raising the silent generation, we're not talking to our children. If we're not on our phones and they're on devices too, there's not that serve and return language development. And here's some examples. And this is across all neighborhoods, which is very interesting. Socioeconomic demographics did not figure in this. In fact, a lot of the more well-to-do neighborhoods had a bigger problem because children don't have the adults around talking to them either. And this slide from the Center on Developing Child at Harvard shows that window sensitivity for language is right here from before birth, peaks at about a year, and goes on till age 5. Interesting in the brain course that they said there is no magic sensitive window for higher cognitive functions. So whether a child learns algebra at age 10 or age 13, it doesn't really matter. But language is a biggie for the first couple of years. So best practices is talk to your children, read to them, sing to them. Don't worry too much about the screens as long as you provide that interaction. And that's important because we're models to our kids. Children learn from us what's important, and we are the gatekeepers to our technology. So it's really important to know that technology is marketed to adults as educational and entertaining, but there's no supporting evidence to that. So it's all marketing. And, you know, parents want to do best for their kids, absolutely. But we have to continually tell parents that, you know what, it's not educational. They can learn the same education in different ways too. So if you choose not to give your child devices, that's okay. They won't be behind. What we're also seeing now too is that adults love their devices and there's pestering behavior. So children need attention. And I remember the olden days, Amy, when we had problems with the phone. The phone would ring, and then the kids start fighting. They want attention. We could never stay on the phone very long. And we're seeing that now with parents being on their phones too long, that the kids are pestering them, and parents think that's bad behavior, but it's really not. It's wanting attention, wanting attachment.
Right. And they need our attention. So
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to get their needs met.
Yes, yes. They may not ask for it in the way we want, but they do need it. Absolutely. Supervision's a big problem, and I, worry now as we're going into summer pool season, that could be a problem. And also, technology is used as parenting tools to occupy the child. So even though children are physically close, they're not interacting. They're not mentally interacting with us. Okay, at this point, do we have any questions? I'll just keep going on until we have some. So yes, it said we're raising the silent generation. Any questions, Amy?
No, I don't see any right now.
Okay. So what we call parent-child interaction is serve and return interactions. And it's a fancy name for just basically paying attention to your child, responding back. I'll tell you one story. My son, I was on computer all day, and he was about 7, and he was trying to talk to me and pestering me, and I wanted to get something done. And eventually he just took me by the hand like this. He grabbed my face and he swooshed me around and said, "Mommy, I'm trying to talk to you." And I was like, okay, I get it. So I gave him my 100% full attention. But kids, especially young children, they really, really need that serve and return. This is a good picture. I like that little boy. He's like, "Oh, I'm giving up." Trying to get her attention.
I think it's worth, I remember when I learned that serve and return is also a big piece of gaining emotional resilience and sort of emotional stability, sort of that ability to handle stress.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of makes you go, oh, okay, that's just another part of that picture of how do we begin to build emotional resilience in our children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hugely helpful.
Yeah.
I want to let you know too, Judy, that Samantha says that that this is you're doing a great job. This is really good information, and she's having an easy time understanding it.
Oh, nice. Thank you. That's good. So again, what parents can do is have lots of unstructured play materials around, and that's things like blocks, Play-Doh, sand, just toys, physical toys that they can play with. And that pick toys that build 5 senses. So things like blocks. I mean, that they put them in their mouths. They can touch them. They can feel them. They can hear them. They can see them. They can smell them. Right? Play-Doh. Those are all things. Really good stuff. So anyone guess what's a child's best toy? Don't go by color coding.
Catherine says parents.
Yay, yes. Here's some really good play materials for young children. So
we have one quick question. Regarding toys, Samantha asks, what are your thoughts on toys that talk, sing, and flash lights to children?
Okay, so it seems what the research does is some of those toys do appeal to kids, but real toys should require some kid effort, right? So children should play with toys, not toys just interact for children. So if you look at this side of the column, the left-hand side, those are toys that are open-ended. They're creative. Children can combine them different ways. They can put their own thoughts, their feelings, their creativity on those toys. Whereas toys that light up and do stuff for children actually often become very boring to kids. I remember buying a very expensive Playmobil train for my son. It was an electric train. He was only 2. I didn't know better, right? And he hated that train. Absolutely hated it, because he just pushed a button and the train went around. That was it. He could add no energy to the toy. And he wanted a toy that he could lie down on the ground and just push along the trains, watch the wheels. He's my engineer now. So
Right.
Kids need toys they can add stuff to. They don't need toys that do stuff for them.
Right.
So,
Rose says her son loves anything made out of cardboard.
yes, great toy. Love
Right.
it. Cardboard is awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
And I know for parents, it's really hard. What do you do when you're in doctor's offices or you're waiting in restaurants, right? You have to keep them busy. So what I did was I came out with this. This is a lunch bag. It zips closed. You can throw it in your diaper bag. And I put things in here like Play-Doh. There's a flashlight, scissors, safety scissors, cards for my tweens, tape. Children love tape.
Yes.
Paper, markers, pipe cleaners, things like that that can keep them busy, keep them creative, and keep their hands busy. You got to watch the Play-Doh, obviously, with the toddlers, but keeps them busy in places. And you're building their 3-dimensional learning. So you don't have to bring the iPad. Okay,
Catherine has a question. How do you handle it when there's a television in the waiting area?
You can't do much about that, although I have been known to go turn them off, but but you can't. You could bring a book with you and just spend that time getting some literacy in and read a book. Children will always take parents' attention over devices, especially that young. They love curling up in your lap and sharing a book time or things like that. So it's hard to compete with screens, but yeah, you have to. So preschooler age. Now, preschoolers are getting more pre-operational thinking, but no logic there. So that's why we don't say logical consequences. But they're in the land of make-believe and magic, which is amazing. So again, their whole creativity is expanding in their brain, and you want them to do it not just on a flat screen, but on 3-dimensional games. What preschoolers use are all these things. I'm not going to read them out, but you probably know what they use. Movies, tablets, video game consoles. Recommendations here are both agree. The Canadian Pediatric Society and American Academy of Pediatrics agree 1 hour per day for preschoolers. Okay, so here's my realistic mother hat. We probably exceeded that back in the 90s. I remember kids love repetition, so they would watch a Disney movie 4 or 5 times a day. So that's about 6 to 7 hours. Okay, don't judge me. Terrible. And that's where that nurturing environmental piece comes in. If you're a parent and you still get that serve and return interaction in, and the reading, we still read every night, you get all those interactions in. Even if you exceed screen time, you're doing fine, absolutely fine. And keep in mind that organizations make recommendations for everybody, so they can't say, well, your child gets more serve and return, so you can increase the screen time or whatever. They're making it a blank recommendation for everyone, but you know how much you do at home, so everybody has to decide for themselves what's best. Physical activity is important, so they recommend 3 hours per day of active play and 1 hour of energetic play, like playground play for preschoolers. And again, they're still under 5. They're still using all 5 senses to play. So here again, make time and space for play. Try not to look at the mess. Engage them, that kind of stuff. what I found learning interesting here was at a conference. They said that when you have ebooks and there's like spots that a child can stop and press a button and something happens, or they're watching a Dora show and Dora makes space for your child to say something and then Dora reacts back. We adults know that Dora is not reacting back. And that's what's missing in serve and return. So it almost interferes with the child's concentration and ability to recall the story, and it distracts them. So as they're building working memory and they're building their executive function, they need sometimes that just continuous, uninterrupted storyline to do that, to work on that skill. So having ebooks or Dora movies that react back isn't always as educational as parents think. So how can you do it? You're still within your control to limit screen time. Best way I found is to say, hey, come on, let's go do this. And if you lead, the children will follow, definitely. For preschoolers, you want to watch background TV. So if your TV is on all the time, or YouTube is on nonstop, you want to be careful, because research shows that that does detract from language development in children. And you want to watch their consumerism in their games. So their advertising is embedded in content now. So kids get brand recognition a lot earlier than we used to. Children as young as 18 months can recognize a logo, and they look at this. They don't even need words. They know exactly what that logo is, the word for it. Interesting, the brains, children's brains, up until the age of 8, they can't distinguish between advertising and the content. So parents have to point those things out. And toys or food are usually the biggest products in children's games marketed for them. You know, they're those free little games on the internet. They sign up and then they want to buy stuff. Virtual worlds, those are very popular for preschoolers. Parents like them because they're cheap. They keep kids busy. But again, serve and return. Okay, I'm not gonna do that one. This is, I think, a very important slide. You can see this is the development of executive function, and this is what a slide from the Brain Core Story course. And from 0 to 3, you can see the self-control of children. And that's why we say, you know, until they're 3, you're just doing damage control. You're keeping them safe, protecting your stuff. And then there's a big leap here up until age 6. And this is why children don't start real school until 6, is because they don't have that self-control needed to be successful in school skills. And then there's another leap here around 13. And I've noticed that with my children, who I've never regulated gaming for my children during the school years because we're homeschoolers. But here too, around 16, 17, that's where they peak their self-control. And I've noticed too, they have really started self-regulating around here without somebody else doing it. And that's pretty normal in a lot of children. You'll see they do start to understand that maybe they have to do other stuff with their lives, like exercise and get on with stuff. Anything you want to add to this, Amy?
No, this chart is really interesting, though. I am just taking it in.
Yeah, I love this. This is now my go-to slide everywhere I go.
It does. It just really makes it clear. We do have a question.
Sure.
Ashley asks, any advice on how to get grandparents on board with the low-tech toys and no screen time for that matter? She says, what she hears the grandparents say is, my kids had lots of toys and watch TV and they're fine. So how do we not offend them and undermine their wisdom?
That's a tough one. That is a tough one. I think maybe what I would respond was that, yeah, but it was different then in that they only had screen time at a certain place and time. And it's true. I mean, yes, we use TV as babysitters, um, but it isn't as all the time as mobile as now. But having said that, Amy, you probably get this question too. Like, it's just grandparents. Just let them spoil them. Like what grandparents do, you can counteract at home, right? You can, you have your rules. Grandparents have their rules. It's, if you can't win the grandparents over to your way of thinking, then it's not going to hurt the children, and maybe it's more important that grandparents develop a relationship with the children too. So that's a tough one.
I like what you say. I think that point you made that, agreeing with them, you're right. Y'all did have the screen time and the TVs and the toys, but it wasn't constant. We didn't have a phone with us everywhere we went. And just saying that and then just trusting them. I think too, what I want for myself is for my parents to be peaceful with my child, and if they have to turn on a screen because they're getting frustrated or tired or they need a break, I would rather them do that and stay peaceful, and then we'll mitigate whatever changes we might need to ourselves.
I remember having this conversation with my partner because I would be interactive with the kids all day, 3D playing, mess, everything. And then he'd come home from work and he'd put on the screens. And I'm like, wait a minute, I get the break here. It's starting to be more interactive 3D. I'm tired. And we had to have a few conversations behind closed doors about that because, it wasn't fair if one person gets all the breaks, but.
Right, because everybody needs a break.
Yeah, you do, right? You share it. Yeah.
And children do too.
Yeah.
I've had some parents who've said, well, as soon as they go to bed, we turn on the TV because we just need a break. And their daughter will come, or son, or all their children will take their turns coming out of bed and saying, but you're getting a break on TV. Why can't I take a break on TV? And they were like, oh, and
yeah. And I mean, screens are very good downtime, absolutely. But again, we just want to be careful not to overuse it.
Right. Just being conscious of it, and how it's affecting them and how it's affecting relationships and brain development.
Yeah, the biggest recommendation is have some tech-free zones in your house. So in our house, we make sure that everybody is off screens at dinner time, lunchtime. So we all come to the table, and even if the kids aren't hungry, come to the table for socialization. And that's where you can start conversations. When company comes over, that's another time is no screens. Unless, it's a gang of teenagers and they go down to the pit. Those times, like interviews, doctor offices, and, just being clear that there are times there are screens and times there's not. Do you have those rules in your house too, Amy?
We do too. We have spaces and times. We actually developed we were having some trouble with wanting screen times right before bed, and we're all tired, right? It's the end of the day. And so we just created a rhythm right there because the screen time seemed to be causing more problems for us. And so we started reading we started reading Harry Potter as a family, and we'd have tea and cookies, and that's how we spent that time. And it just really took that struggle out. And then we just found a different way to have screens. Because we get it. It's a draw. It's exciting. We all want it. But it just was having problems right then. So.
Right. Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
That reading before bed, we kept that up too well into the teen years. Is how family reading, especially Harry Potter. I mean, there's so many things out there now.
It's so fun. We had so much fun. For 9 months, literally, we read Harry Potter every night before bed. It was really lovely and fun.
Yeah, those are good. And that's language development. That's where,
Yeah,
you're serve and returning too, because
all
you're,
the time.
yeah,
The
making sure.
questions and discussions and interactions. It was really lovely. And
Hmm.
then we just said, we will figure out how to meet your desire for screen times earlier in the day.
Hmm.
Um, when I'm cooking, it's a good time for her to have screen time
Yeah, yeah,
if she doesn't want to
yeah.
cook.
Um, I think what we did was, and some parents do, is hand out tokens. So they get like 40 tokens a week, 1 token per hour, and then they can choose where to spend their tokens. Or they could be half an hour or whatever. And it gives the kids control. So, because I have seen video games, I see that you can't really get anywhere in 20 minutes of screen time. Like you need a good stretch to level up or play with someone. So that gives kids more of a way to spend their tokens too.
Yeah.
Is it helpful? Yeah. Okay, I'm just mindful of the time. So what I'm going to do is scooch ahead to school age. Do we have anybody with teenagers on here? While we're looking at that, teenagers.
We have Susan says she has teens, and then we had one comment that said that they love the token idea. She says it helps the child understand or develop a concept for how much it costs to play on devices.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I'll spend 5 minutes on school age and 5 minutes on teens, and then we'll take questions too.
Okay.
So for school age, there are no real recommendations. It used to be under 2 hours a day, and then as school age kids get to school and schools are using more screen time, then it became very messy. So now both Canadian Pediatric Society and Academy of um, American Academy of Pediatrics just suggest to have some balance and moderation in their lives. So and there's the concern for young children is mostly language development, interactions with parents, serve and return. For older children, there's not any concerns other than getting enough physical activity, getting enough sleep. So sleep or screens are interfering with children's sleep if they keep their screens in their bedrooms, and also not getting enough time outside interactively. And that's a huge problem for parents. I've had that too. I show this slide when I kicked all 4 of my kids out and I said, okay, that's it, go outside and play. And you know what? They grabbed their Wii remotes and they're playing through the 1/2 inch of glass on the dining room window. Because I came out and I thought, gee, it's awfully quiet. What are they doing?
That's hilarious.
Oh, it's terrible. So, but one thing that I think helped was when my kids went through school age, we didn't pack away all the messy toys. Like we still had painting, we still had sewing machines, art supplies, and kids still need to use all 5 senses. Like they're not putting things in their mouths anymore. So they're not smelling and tasting, but they're talking and doing. And usually a lot of parents pack away all the messy stuff when their kids go to school, and then the kids don't have anything to do 3D when they get home. So try and watch that. The other thing I wanted to suggest, what do kids do at this age? Well, a lot of what they do is yeah, still not a lot of cell phones up until 6 to 9. Start getting cell phones around 10 to 12, 13. That's when peer pressure kicks in and they want to have that. But they're also moving from viewing content to creating content, and you'll see a lot of interesting stuff then. They're getting more into the internet, and I'm not going to reiterate all those dangers because I think people are quite aware of them right now too. So I'm just gonna, how do you limit screen time in the school age years? I think it's best if you talk to the kids and get them on board with setting limits. And you know what? your whole family has to abide by the limits.
Right.
So try not to punish. Now, the big concern I find with parents is they give their kids cell phones so that they can take them away and punish kids with that. It seems to be their only tool motivating kids. I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's very important to problem solve with children and say, you know, you're not getting enough physical activity. How do we fix this? How can we meet our needs together? Because I'm worried about you. Yeah, and negotiation is good. Always negotiate before they get on devices because it's a lot harder after.
So true.
Well, even if you have to get them to sign a paper saying, I will wrap this game up by 9 o'clock.
Or get them to let you videotape them saying it, so then you could show it to them on a device.
Yes, exactly, right? That's good. That's very good. Yes, absolutely. So a lot of negotiation, and I love negotiation in parenting. I know it's a 11-letter word for some people, but I think it's good skills for children for their future relationships. So negotiate everything. And I find sometimes just inviting him out. So if my son's been on the video games all day, I'll say, okay, you know what? We're going for a walk in 20 minutes. So when you wrap up this game of Overwatch, let's go for a walk. And if he knows that, if I give him the time to finish his commitments to the kids he's playing with and be reasonable that way, then he will turn it off and go for a walk with me. So I do get that time in, but you have to be open to negotiation for that age. Contracts are good. I have one on my website, and it's a very non-punitive one. I'm just going to run through what we need here. Social media. So a lot of children this age are getting on social media. Parenting best practices are don't post anything that's embarrassing, and no shaming. I know that's a new tool too, and it's really, really bad because it hangs around the internet forever. And social media is a part of kids' life. I actually took this picture in a pub and I thought, wow, you guys are playing cards. And I thought, wow, they're not on their phones. Isn't that cool?
Right.
So, and you know what? And this is my friend, and she posted this on her social media, and I was saying, you know what? I think the kids tend to be a little more cautious than friends my age now. like she works for a Catholic organization. What would they think? So, anyways, I think the kids are pretty savvy at that thing. And, you know, kids, they connect in the real world, but they do cement those relationships online for sure. So again, big thing here, schedule breaks and try not to use taking away devices to, you know, get cooperation. Okay, and get them out. Yes, so let's, sorry, teenagers in 5 minutes. Teens love the internet because it's a playground they can play in without adults. They're so over-controlled these days that they can go to a place where they're not controlled. And that's one of the biggest benefits there. So I like to show this slide because as you have teens, anyone with teens or even tweens, as you know, you're losing your control over them. But if you have a really strong, good, collaborative, negotiating relationship, your influence grows. So what you think matters to them, and that's very good. You want that. And like I said, in that terms of executive function developing, I found among my kids, they became more serious, more school orientated, more worried about their health as they reached about 15, 16, 17. And then they started to self-regulate then. Again, that big piece there. They're going from users to creators. They make all kinds of interesting stuff. Number one safety tip is don't use your tech and drive, because that's what they do. If you do it, they will do it. So that's probably the biggest one you want to watch for. So what did I want to talk here? Limiting screen time, same as school age, like share your values, spend time together, negotiate with them. Say, I'm worried about this. I think you're spending too much time on this game. What can we do to meet both our needs? And see what you can come up with. Because by then they're pretty well on their, they're doing their thing pretty well. Yeah. And keep in mind, parents matter more than technology. You are still number one in their lives. A lot of research shows that. Their brains need you. Their brains aren't finished that executive function developing till they're age 25. So they still need you as their external brain, scaffolding, some routines, some structure in their lives, but also being open to negotiation to what their needs are too. Has anybody seen that movie School-Agers? Did you see that documentary?
I have not seen it, but I've heard. It's on my list.
Yeah, it's very interesting because at the start of the documentary, the mom gives the daughter, a 5-page contract agreement, and it's all the mom's rules.
Oh, wow.
And then by the end of the documentary, they ripped that up and started again with mom's and child's rules. So I was like, oh, that's good.
Right.
And I'm just gonna, so in the teen years, you need communication. That's the big thing. And if you take away their devices, you shut down their communication with you. And you need to be around when they say, I'm being bullied, what do I do? Or this guy is trying to get me to take a picture, what do I do? You need to be that confident, and they won't come to you if you're going to take away their device and punish them. So got to keep those communication lines open, and that keeps them safe. Probably the big takeaway here. Here are some things to spend time together with teens. Game night, or have a dedicated movie night, maybe once a week. Or Amy, I don't know if you do some of these with your daughter.
We do.
Yeah, it's great, right?
We have game night and movie night. Mm-hmm. We try to walk after dinner, and we have just kind of some rhythms to our days. And of course, some days the rhythm goes haywire and we just lay around because we're exhausted. That happens too. But some things that are just really fun to do.
Yeah, and it's I know from experience as a mom. I mean, I suggest a walk and I get met with groans, right? But don't let that turn you off. Like after they'll groan, they'll grumble, they'll get their shoes on. We go out the door, and they know, like I only push so far. If they really, really don't want to go for a walk, I don't push it. I know when to back off, but I still keep nudging. And that's applying that scaffolding, is still nudging, still offering, still saying, hey, let's do this. And then we go for a walk. It's great. We come home and I say, well, are you glad you went? And they said, yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's knowing how far to push with that particular child, and how, at what point do you back off and say, okay, maybe not today, but I'll try again tomorrow.
Right. And you do know, right? You do know when you can push a little more and coax them and smile and nudge and hug them until they're like, okay.
That's right. So there's lots of things to do together. So, and I think that's all I'm going to present on that piece. So if anybody has any questions you would like.
We have one question. Catherine says, I have seen radical unschoolers who insist that kids will self-limit and self-regulate everything, food, screens, bedtime, etc. They'll self-regulate everything in their lives if parents don't use arbitrary limits. What is your take on this?
I have seen that for sure, but I've also seen it takes a while. Like, I've seen unschoolers who stay up all night. I've seen it in my house. I've seen some unschoolers who don't have regular meal times, and I know that children do like repetition, and we all do. We are all creatures of a habit. You've probably noticed when you do a parenting course, whoever comes and sits in that chair the first night, that's where they sit the next week, right? They're
Right.
creatures of habit. So we all want some structure, some routine on when things happen. Um, but I have friends who kids do play like 20 hours a day. But I have seen this regulation happen too around the late teens, where they have decided they don't want to do that anymore. They want to get more physically good, eat better food, eat regularly, stuff like that too. So um, I think we all get to that point. I think some parents apply more structure, more scaffolding earlier, and some don't, but the kids do get it. I think there's an odd child who doesn't get regulated. And then, you know what? They go out in the world, or they get a relationship and they do get regulated. So it does happen at some point in time, I think. What are your thoughts, Amy? What do you think of that?
You know, I've read multiple things about it. I think unless there's, you know, there are some things that go on in the brain where a child's brain doesn't send them the signal that they're full. You know, like, so there's always these outliers that can happen. I think I feel like this is so personal that each parent really has to think about what they want for their children. And you know, it's a lot of what you said. Will they self-regulate? They might. Um, I agree. I think they probably do. Um, but it's also okay to collaborate and problem solve with them and to share your concerns and say, you know, I noticed that you're not getting outside and that you're not getting exercise and that you're not eating, and I am concerned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just bringing it into their awareness
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what kind of things y'all can do together to work on that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's could be a part of them learning to self-regulate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. They start to experience, oh, maybe half an hour on the treadmill a day, I do feel better, or I do sleep better.
Right. I can do better in that game I'm working on, right?
Right, yeah, for sure. That's right. Any more questions?
I'm not seeing any more
Hmm.
questions. It's funny because that's probably one of the questions that I get from parents who are unschoolers or homeschoolers and thinking about where they're going on their homeschooling journey is, what if they don't regulate? You know, or will they regulate? Or I know they're regulate. We have those conversations a lot, I think, about what is
Mm-hmm.
it like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, to problem solve with your child or just to help bring this into their awareness.
I found that interesting too, because like, for example, meals in our house. I mean, I'm sure our kids would be very happy just to go grab food whenever they wanted. But I had to kind of declare my desire to have a sit down meal in an iMessage, like, I value family meal time, and can you do this for me? And they're more than happy to do it if I give them warning what time. So yeah, but I think yeah, it helps to put a little structure in there if you want structure, and then eventually, I think people, like you say, there are the outliers too. So
Right.
um,
And there's something to be said for us using I statements and saying, you know what, I really want to spend time with you. I
mhm,
would like to see everybody's smiling face or not smiling face around the table while we are together.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, because I miss my kids when they're behind screens. I only see the back of their heads, and I'm like, oh, I miss you guys. I want to spend time with you.
right, right.
It's like, oh, oh.
Yeah.
So
You're a part of the family equation. It looks like we have one more question.
okay.
Ashley asks, is there any research you can point to that discusses the difference in the effects on baby and toddler brains of old-fashioned screen technology, the 90s, she says with an LOL, with today's high-definition technology?
Hmm. I think the only difference right now is the analog versus the digital, the blue light, right? So the blue light mimics, it affects the pineal gland, and it keeps us awake. So they're looking at whether babies that are spending too much time in front of iPads, are awake more. And there's some research out, but again, like, we need more studies, more long-term studies, where the old TVs just didn't have that effect, right? The other thing too is that a lot of movies now, are, especially for kids, are very fast,
Yes.
flashy,
Yes.
woo. And is that getting kids used to that they go to a math class and it's so long and boring? And there's studies out there now that our patience level is, we go to a website, look it over in 30 seconds, we're gone. Our attention span has certainly been affected. So they're looking at studies of that in children now, how much shorter their attention span is. But again, that's still pretty new too. But other than that, Amy, do you have any other?
The only thing that comes to my mind is they've compared, I don't know the lingo, so I'll say it as I understand it. When we watched TV growing up, it might have been like Mr. Rogers. It was maybe 100 screenshots a minute. But then now when you watch something like SpongeBob SquarePants, it's like 5,000 screenshots per minute or something. And so there's just a lot more going on today's cartoons than there was back in the 70s when I was growing up, which was even before the 90s, right? So that's part of the difference, the number of things that are coming up on the screens.
Yes. Yes, I even noticed that too. I watched a movie. We still have VHS here, and I watched a movie from the 90s, and it seemed like I really liked it at the time, but it seems so boring and long and slow now. Like, maybe I'm getting used to stuff more faster. But I think too, parents can counteract that by taking your kids to the theater, like to children's theater, and same with teenagers as they get older, taking them to the theater so they can still enjoy slow, old ways of enjoying entertainment too.
Right.
They're even proposing that, I don't know about the US, but in Canada, our math scores have dropped, and I do have a slide on that, have dropped from the PISA scores have dropped, and they're saying that it may be because children are not touching math like we used to. We're doing more math on screens rather than in the kitchen baking and spending real coins and money, and Monopoly now doesn't even come with money. You get those little credit card things that
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, you don't count out physical money anymore, and that children are not getting that experiential math in order to understand the symbolic math when they do it on paper. So that's still new too. There's not a whole lot of studies on that either, but it's an interesting. I wonder.
We have one more question. Do you have time for another?
You betcha.
Okay. Samantha says, in a family where there are significant communication problems and attachment disruptions, screen time has become a significant problem because the family spends a lot of time apart, and parents become blaming and shaming of the child choosing screens over time with family. Would you suggest working on communication and connection as a first issue to consider before approaching the screen issue? I'm I'm thinking older school-aged / teen children. I hope my question makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Um, I probably would, because you have a lot more influence if you have connection.
Yeah.
What do you think, Amy?
Yes, I agree. I think the very first thing I would implement would be to begin to schedule in special time together, even if it starts special time watching a movie together, if that's the way you have to begin that sort of attachment repair, finding ways to move in close and begin to repair those the relationship is going to be the first important thing.
Mm-hmm.
um, Movie time, going for walks, doing something the child likes, um, would be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And as Judy said, that you have to have that connection before you can influence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so too. Yeah, and I find too that's one thing. I think it was Gordon Neufeld who said connect and then direct. So
Yeah.
even when I'm trying to kick my kids off the computers, I'll go up to them and I'll rub their shoulder and say, hey, wow, whoa, you're really doing good there. How about we wrap it up in 20 minutes, right? So making that connection. But yeah, spending time together, walks, movies, date nights, sort of, like just one-on-one time. Um,
Right.
and then they care about what you think. They want to please you, and then they might modify their behavior more in terms of what you want. When you say your iMessage, I'm really worried about the amount of time we spend on screens. Can we implement some um, routines that we spend more time together? Then they would be more likely to want to do that and work it out. Yeah. Bottom line is you can't force anyone to, you know, like, yeah, you can't force anyone to stop. If you shut down kids' screens, they'll just go somewhere else too.
Right. Then they're just going to go to someone else's house, or they're going to sneak them,
Yeah.
and it pushes them away.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So if there's no more questions, I just want to end on the benefits. So if you're like me and you're overloading, um, there's benefits of the internet. I mean, there's lots of good stuff here with children, and especially older kids. I'm talking more about older children over like age 6, 7. But that connection family, and here's my mother-in-law watching my son graduate from England. Like that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then benefits of gaming, there's lots of really good benefits. They develop critical analytical thinking under time management, literacy, um, pattern recognition, a lot of math operations too, and it's definitely spurs creativity. So like in our house, there's lots of pottery and art going on. And I have to say, my daughter too, I mean, she's a real gamer too, and she's found benefits there in terms of critical thinking and problem solving too, not just for boys. My kids would make books and little Kirby stuffies, costumes. There's a Minecraft cake. Is your
Nice.
daughter into Minecraft?
She's not, but she has 2 friends who love it, and they've had Minecraft birthday parties, and yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
And costumes are big. Like we all my kids went to Comic-Con and they would make their own costumes, and it was so
When
creative.
I saw that picture, I was like, y'all are so awesome. I love it.
But it's amazing what
Yeah,
people do. Like
yeah.
there's lots of good stuff, and they make really funny memes and things.
That's great. Did he do that?
Yeah. So artwork, yeah. So
Yeah,
there's lots of good stuff and life skills. There's lots of life skills here, like relaxation, delayed gratification, teaches
right.
focusing, builds self-esteem.
We read those Harry Potter books, and between the books, we would watch the movie. And my daughter could tell you every single thing that was missing in the movie. Like her
Wow.
ability to compare and contrast. I was blown away by, Mom, they went to go get Hermione's cat. They didn't even show her getting the cat. And she would like recite the line out of the book that they should have said when she got the cat. I mean, I was, like that's a lot of life skills going on just by really
Yeah.
um, using technology and showing what is the difference between a book and a movie. And
Yeah. That's amazing. Good
oh, I was
for her.
blown away.
That's very talented. Wow.
She just was very interested. So
Yeah.
the whole thing between the books and the movies, she's just trying to wrap her head around.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
great. Good. Okay, well, I think we're done. Thank you for joining us tonight, and feel free if you have any more questions. Amy, I think would be happy to answer them. If you want a private question to Amy or a private question to me, I'd be happy to answer them. And we're gonna have to figure out where we post this video for people.
Right.
Yeah, Amy. Thanks for joining tonight, and so great to see you again.
It's so great to see you. Thank you for inviting me to join you.
Yeah, yeah.
I know we are so aligned in our non-punitive approach to parenting and learning and living, and it's really lovely to catch up with you again too.
Yeah, same here for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, everybody have a good evening and enjoy summer that's coming.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, Judy.
Bye, Amy.